After that beautiful session that just concluded, I welcome all of you to the closing plenary session that asks the questions: what did we learn? What can WAAS do? Before we go to these questions, I would like to thank all our moderators, panelists, rapporteurs, and attendees who have made this event a success. I also acknowledge with thanks the many messages and emails received from many of you. They will help us in planning and organizing our future events. We've seen good attendance in Zoom as well as YouTube. The recordings of all the sessions are available on the WAS website. This conference is one more step in the project that the Academy has initiated in finding the root causes of global social turbulence and the solutions that we need. I thank all our partner organizations for your collaboration, for co-organizing sessions, and for spreading the word through your networks. I would also like to thank the entire WAS support team that has taken care of the work that goes on backstage. Everyone, speakers as well as all participants, are invited to submit articles to Cadmus. Write to editorial@cadmusjournal.org for any questions. I also invite feedback and ideas for future programming and activities. Send in your suggestions to support@worldacademy.org. These invitations and the mail IDs will be posted in a Zoom chat, and we will also be mailing to you again. Your feedback will help us in the formulation of our future programming. We want to have serious follow-up to this event, follow-up that gains momentum in several directions and has impact. We will be continuing with additional programming on the themes discussed in these 4 days. Some of them are in the research stage, some are already in the project stage. So please share your thoughts. We would like to know where our future focus should be and who would like to contribute. You're invited as individuals and as representing your organizations to join us as we move forward. And we begin that process now with our panelists in this session, every one of whom has contributed greatly to this event. First, I invite Ketan Patel, Executive Director and Trustee of WAAS, Chair Force for Good, CEO and co-founder, Greater Pacific Capital. Ketan, let's please have your suggestions, thoughts, ideas.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Janani. Let me thank you for the wonderful job you've done here, bringing us together and managing this. I want to also thank Garry for his vision and commitment, which I know has been extraordinary here to bring this together, and the team working with him. I know this is all consuming. As I reflect on this, I find myself in awe of the last 4 days. They've been tremendous. We, the Academy, I think, have been actors in an important drama where we've learned something from each other. And I think I would not be remiss to say there has been true wisdom that has come out of so many of these sessions. And in addition to that, I think there's been love and compassion and a lot of emotion. And so it's a true experience that I feel privileged to, as Force for Good, having been a partner of, but individually having participated in. From the sessions, I think I learned much and I captured some of the key thinking. And I'd just like to quickly run through that. So firstly, one of the messages that I think is a recurring theme is that we are at a crossroads as humanity, and so is the planet. And there is an opportunity to remedy that because of so many things, but we are at this crossroad. And a number of times it was said, and I find myself saying this too, that this is a civilizational shift. Secondly, the root causes of our challenges go deep though, and they result from many failures to address these roots and absorb us in the symptoms rather than in the roots. But we've made so many breakthroughs. We have the tools, we have the solutions. And so whatever jungle was born from those roots, we certainly know that we could, if we chose to, work through this and find the way through to the other side. A number of times I've heard things like that this is a fight, almost, a battle for truth, for justice, for sharing. And for confronting the abuse and misuse of power, the use of fear and greed and misinformation. That exists too, alongside all the opportunity that we have. And it's also clear that in some of the discussions we've had, that the agents of the chaos that we're experiencing, this polycrisis, are in some ways more energetic, more resourceful, more committed, more able to mobilize than those that would counter them. The battle is not lost, of course, and the forces against this kind of misrule of the world are mobilizing and are doing good. But there does seem to be a battle at this stage between those different visions of the world in terms of what it should be and how it should perform and operate and how it should affect all of us. Breaking through requires systemic change, and that was a recurring theme in many of the sessions that I was in. And that, although necessary, is very, very difficult. So in terms of the sessions that were very technical, they also pointed to tools of great consequence, AI being perhaps the foremost, but pointing to others in the fields of energy, physical materials, climate, all of which could be a force for good or ill. So the choices still came down to individuals and how we conduct ourselves. The other resource of money, it was clear was available in plenty, but as I reflect on that discussion about capital and the global financial system, it is clear that it is a fruit of the old system. It's not really available for fully leveraging to solve the problems of the world. And therefore, the choices end up being, do you fight for it in some way, or do you create the new system of enterprise, which is on new principles, alongside this one until it takes over? Today, I was privileged to participate in a session on history and the lessons from history. And it was clear again that there was much that history could teach us and shine a light on. It wasn't that history gave us the answer as to where we're going, but it shone a light, and it showed the various cycles of human development, planetary development, human development, cycles of violence, cycles of power struggle, and also potentially the window into where we might go next. We're a product of our past. That was clear in the previous session to this one and in the one before, captured somehow in our genetics, in our psychology, in our environment. And to break through required us to address perhaps the inner turmoil, to find that peace inside and the compassion inside, so we could properly handle the outer world and not have it reflect our turmoil. So in concluding, it felt to me like this is a great moment that we've explored in this conference. It's a great moment in history for us all. Very exciting, full of opportunity, full of possibility, full of threats to handle. And I come away believing that actually the Academy has taken an important step forward in positioning itself to actually tackle these issues and fulfill its mandate. And so I'm delighted to be part of it and to have experienced the last 4 days with my colleagues and friends and many new people that I've met. Thank you.
Thank you, Ketan. First, we are also delighted that you are part of this, and we're thankful to you. And thank you for this very powerful summary, because as we go through all the recordings and the chat messages, the questions that are posted, and the emails that we have been receiving, and as we try to extract the essence of these 4 days, this will be very helpful to us as we decide on next steps.
Thank you,
Now
Janani.
I invite Phoebe Koundouri, Professor, Athens University of Economics and Business and the University of Cambridge, Chair, SDSN Global Climate Hub. Phoebe, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Janani. It's been an exciting conference, very impactful. And we are all grateful to Garry, our president and leader, Ketan, executive director, all the board, the trustees member, the contributors, the fellows, but also the audience who had the patience to listen and participate and interact. It's so important that we created this space and ecosystem that can really put together the different disciplines and the different stakeholders and the different views in order to guide the way away from the multi-crisis. My intervention, let's say, in this closing session, brings together what I heard throughout these days, but also has a very personal flavor and derives from the work that I do with the Alliance of Excellence for Research and Innovation on Sustainability, a big research team that works around the world on facilitating and accelerating the implementation of Sustainable Development Goals in close collaboration with UN SDSN, the Sustainable Development Solutions Network. And a bit of what I'm going to say also derives from our work with the Pontifical Academy on Science, and in particular, the work of that academy with regards to sustainable development and financing sustainable development, that I hope we can also be integrated with the wonderful work that WAAS is doing. So Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 goals, include peace and collaboration. And from this conference, I understand and I fully agree that peace and collaboration is #1 priority. Without peace and collaboration, we cannot implement anything, we cannot transform, we cannot transition. So SDG 16 focuses explicitly on peace and strong institutions, and SDG 17 is focused on collaboration. And what's more, we know that the SDGs is a framework that is very holistic and integrated, which basically means you cannot implement any of the SDGs fully without the other SDGs being implemented. So SDGs can really help us escape the current multi-crisis, the convergence of climate change, biodiversity loss, social inequality, geopolitical tensions, war, and economic instability. They can help us escape the multi-crisis because they provide a universal, integrated, and actionable framework for addressing the root causes of these interconnected challenges. What do? They integrate economic, social, and environmental priorities and offer a blueprint, not just for recovery from today's crisis, but for transformation, like Ketan was saying, towards a resilient, inclusive, and sustainable future. They do not offer instant solutions, but they reframe global action around long-term well-being rather than short-term gains, and create the essential mindset shift needed to escape this multi-crisis. And the SDGs have a lot of momentum, and they are being integrated in governmental structures and policy frameworks. The global commitment to the SDGs is strong. It's 190 out of 193 countries in the UN have presented national action plans for achieving sustainable development. It is true, European countries continue to top the SDG performance index, but also East and Southeast Asia have outperformed all other regions in terms of SDG progress since 2015. So the pace is faster. The pace of implementing the SDGs is faster in East and South Asia. And although on average we are far from being on track, only 15% of the targets are on track to be achieved worldwide. Most UN member states have made strong progress on targets related to access to basic services, infrastructure, including mobile broadband use, access to electricity, internet use, under-5 mortality rate, and neonatal mortality. So it's a lot of progress being made, and it's a unifying framework for everybody. And there is commitment, and there is intrusion of that commitment into policy and legal frameworks. So it's a lot of progress being made to be jeopardized through reshuffling the same ideas in a new framework. This is my opinion. And I'm sorry about that, but I usually share my opinion in quite explicit way. So I want to close all of this by pinpoint one of the main problems, which is also relevant to what I do. So for many developing countries, the lack of fiscal space is the major obstacle to SDG progress. So we know that roughly half of world population lives in countries that cannot invest adequately in sustainable development because they have debt burdens and have lack of access to affordable long-term capital. So global public goods are vastly underfinanced. So here, our practical challenge, in addition to helping sustain peace, which is actually a challenge that will support will contribute to supporting peace, is to enable SDG-driven investments in impoverished places today where governments lack the current revenue, the fiscal space. And we need to provide health services, nutritional supplementation, and quality schooling. 250 million children are out of school today. 733 million people struggle with chronic hunger, and roughly 1/3 of humanity cannot afford a healthy diet. So for me, one of the important practical problems facing all of us, all the UN member states, is to enable the vast 30 trillion pool of wealth saving to flow in much larger amounts to the countries that are most in need, the low income, lower middle income countries, and countries that are more vulnerable to global environmental shock, and to the poorest people in all countries. And for that, like we discussed in this conference, we have to reform the international financial architecture. As a practical matter, the international financial architecture should ensure that wealth saving flows to emerging markets and developing economies with long maturities and low cost of capital are aligned to the investment needs and realistic timing of long-term convergence growth in those countries. And the debt relief should entail that at least restructuring of the outstanding debts is achieved for countries that are heavily burdened with debts. And we need to understand that 30 to 40 years is the realistic timeline that aligns with future economic growth. You need to give loans with very long maturities, low interest rate. And the good news is that sustainable development is a very, it's an activity that is high return. Economic development is a high return activity. And this is what we economists call economic convergence. Emerging and developing countries achieve faster economic growth than high-income countries. And this makes all these projects to the poorest countries bankable. So, in closing, I just want to say in 30 seconds that this is what we also discussed at the fourth International Conference on Financing for Development in Seville. What we need to do now is turn the pledges of Seville into action through follow-ups, national reforms, and global cooperation. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Phoebe. That was a very powerful message of hope. Thank you for that. And we also look forward to working with you and your research team in the future. Our next speaker is Mila POPOVICH, Director General, Directorate for Interculturalism, Government of Montenegro. Over to you, Mila.
Thank you so much, Janani, and dear friends. It has been an exciting 4 days, just like as Ketan said, and Phoebe confirmed the richness of what was shared. What I'm taking away from what I've listened to and shared with colleagues and friends and co-creators is the understanding that we do not lack knowledge. It's apparent, even within one organization of how many, about 800 members from around the world. That's important though, because of the richness of perspectives. We do not lack knowledge. We experience loss of knowledge where there's lack of collaboration. So one of the key questions for the World Academy, World University Consortium, and the world at large would be, what are the principles of the new quality of self-organization and federation of knowledge and synergizing of action? What are the higher principles to self-organize? So look at the irony of the moment, where a processor is unifying and integrating collective intelligence and spewing back to us solutions that scare us. Because those very solutions seem to have the capacity to control us in return. But we ourselves are not able to unify and synergize our action for our own survival and sustainability and stability and security. What's going on here? What's going on at the heart of every human being and at the heart of every organization in order to sustain its own relations, in order to multiply its knowledge exponentially and transmute it into action? So the quality of human decision then depends on the quality of the questions we ask ourselves. So I'm going to start with the question that I don't expect an answer for now, but the question that I would like to seed in the hearts and the minds of ourselves today in our organization, and I'll come back to it. Happy 65th and 65 forward. Let's just leave it at 2100. Looking back at this moment, at yourself, at your own life, at the life of your organization, the role you and your organization are playing in the world, what would you do? Who would you be and how would you act? And what kind of knowledge do you think you would spread and values would you demonstrate in order to be effective? And also, as we have heard from some of my colleagues in one of my panels, is the Socratic, the life not only well lived, hopefully if we live it well, but the life well examined. That's what we need to do. So it's a dignified life that we need to demonstrate today, because as we have found out from science and spirituality, our DNA is rewritable like a disc. So what kind of inscriptions are we leaving today? In that sense, what was left with me and what was shared in the collective intelligence over these days is one of the things that I've heard from Arthur. I think Olivia talked about the Socratic life, but Arthur talked about peace indivisible. And there's not enough time to unpack the power of some of these things that were shared today. But that peace is indivisible. And maybe I'll come back to this question and the peace indivisible at the very end. So what we figured out is that learning has been unleashed. Learning is happening everywhere, every day, all the time, unstoppably. And phones, media, the least in schools and the slowest in schools. With the learning being unleashed, education truly has become a social learning process. So what kind of, again, self-organization and organization and institutions and processes do we need to develop in order to magnify that process beneficially, capture and drive and channel the social power of that process beneficially for all humanity? So social leadership is really being also unleashed. How are we connecting the civic sector power and the best practices? How are we truly connecting the collective intelligence and switching it on to guide the artificial intelligence, so to speak, to solve our existential problems and serve humanity? So there has been a reminder that science, tech, government, finance, economies are all human. So what is the priority? The priority is then to refine the human being and to develop the human being in fullness of his or her and our capacity. And there are so many to be unleashed yet beyond AI and other sciences. So to refine, that's the key. To refine the human being with the highest of principles and values is the vital key to evolve the consciousness and conscience, to run the tech, to solve our existential problem and not to be run by it or to be run over by it. What we need to practice then is what I've called for science, tech, and data solidarity. What does that mean? If we are all the time with every word, every thought, every blink, every change in temperature and movement being registered and harvested for artificial intelligence, then for goodness sake, we've been calling for sharing of personal stories and testifying of our own lives in order to derive a higher truth that is based on universal human being, which is based on universal human needs and aspirations, which we know are truly universal. If you want to start from breath, from air, water, food, but also love and care and social connections and bonds as primary. So it has been a revelation and a whole huge sense of accomplishment and inspiration to hear from Ketan today use the word love. After 15 years of my experience in the World Academy, we talk about spirituality, loving care, friendship, and human bonds. I feel fulfilled. So what we need to drive towards is that data solidarity, science solidarity, out of its co-option for commercial and military purposes. So what we need for that is unified and unifying culture, the culture that can inform this kind of values-based organization, individual and global. And that unavoidably is going to be built on, as I mentioned, I'll mention those building blocks: universal human needs and aspirations, unifying knowledge that we're all interconnected and mutually interdependent, which lead to universal human rights and, I insist, responsibilities and universal humanistic values that, for what I've shared, is a culture of interbeing, indivisible, is peace indivisible and human rights indivisible. That would be the culture of peace indivisible, that would be the sublimation of human rights and responsibilities into unity and diversity, social cohesion, and human security, that should lead to new social contract that determines the value, worth, and price of everything based on all of these mentioned above, and that would lead to a new paradigm of human development, of which World Academy and its founders have spoken so long ago, and we're still grappling with it. With it goes the right to future. And then the question of the future of human rights, given the conditions that we are in. And the right to healthy natural environment, equally now, the right to healthy social environment. And with that, I have called for an empathetic revolution across all borders, because we are sentient beings, which means no matter what your economic background, no matter what your intellectual background, sense of accomplishment, or destitution, we're all still stewing in the same social soup, and spinning on the same globe through the universe, which means you cannot not know, you cannot not feel what others feel. Sooner or later, it will be at your door. So the wars out there at some inconsequential destinations. There are none such anymore, nor an inconsequential human being. Believe me, AI will tell you that, because AI loves outliers because it needs to refine itself from all human experience. So we better take good care of each other, and we better remember that we belong to each other, and that we should use the evolutionary potential of technology to solve our issues, to put us in each other's shoes empathetically, to expand the culture of interbeing and solidarity and co-responsibility for shared futures, and empower human agency to govern ourselves, our systems, and our organizations on a values-based source in order to ensure a good life. That's what we need, a good
Thank
life.
you. Thank you. Thank you for those very beautiful words. In one of the sessions yesterday, this point came up that today we call ceasefire peace. You're emphasizing that the idea of peace indivisible is very necessary today. Now I invite Garry Jacobs, President and CEO of the World Academy of Art and Science, for the concluding remarks. Unmute. Yes.
I'd like to thank our dedicated panelists, all of you who are here, and all of those who participated during this conference, which far exceeded my expectations, and all the participants who have been listening in and giving their chat messages and helped inspire and encourage us to go forward. Listening to this panel, it reminds me of what a privilege it is to have been elected as the president of the Academy. How lucky I am to be working with such an extraordinary group of people on issues such as this. When we decided on naming this conference WAAS at 65, our intention was not to celebrate the 65th year of the Academy or to pat ourselves on the back for the great achievements of our forefathers. It was to remind us of why we have this Academy and why it was founded, and what was its mission and intention, and what we should be doing with it now, and what's our responsibility as the current leadership of the Academy. In her opening remarks on 4 days ago, Janani gave a brief history, mostly of the last 10 years, which are 12 years now, which started when we were invited by the UN Geneva to partner with them on a project we called Global Challenges and Opportunities. As I listened to the discussions during this 4 days, I found at many points we were able to confirm or reconfirm ideas or convictions that came out of that project 12 years ago, or in the years since, the years after that. Some very fundamental conclusions about the current world we live in and the situation we live in. One of them was, it was very clear to us, as I think it was to the founders and formulators of Agenda 2030, as Phoebe said, that all these challenges are interrelated with each other. And the knowledge we've been trying to work on up until now and in this conference was to explore and remind ourselves and go deeper into those interrelationships, and maybe we have done it a little more than ever before. Another was the conviction that we had even then that none of these challenges can be addressed by any country individually for itself, because we really are in all of this together, and our solutions have to be for the whole. And our problems, in fact, are for the whole, And none of us can be insulated and isolated and freed from it, no matter where we are or how much wealth we have or what type of government we have. We also came to the conclusion that none of these issues we're dealing with today could be settled effectively by the then existing knowledge that was driving our policy making and even driving our academic and scientific research. And it's been rewarding to see to what extent that knowledge has been evolving over the last decade and how different is some of the language that our participants are using now and some of the consciousness of the awareness we have of what we emphasize as the transdisciplinary relationships of all of the disciplines and the knowledge and the interconnectivity between them. We also realized at that time that the existing educational system that we had then, and to a large extent, very large, we still have now, is not the system that's going to give us the support we need to either prepare our current policymakers or certainly our future generations to really be fully equipped to cope with the challenges that we face. That was the rationale why a year later we founded the World University Consortium, and that's why we've run 7 future education conferences, and that's why every conference we have on any subject, we're trying to look at what are the implications of this for education and how education should evolve to take us further. And we also came to the conclusion that none of these challenges could be faced effectively with the kind of thinking that we've been doing up until now, that unless we change the way we're thinking, we're not going to be able to completely address these issues. And one of the main purposes of this conference was to help us change that way of thinking by thinking together, by reevaluating the premises, the assumptions, the policies, the programs that we have been following up until now, and see how can we take this further? How can we look beyond? What have we missed? What have we not understood up until now? At the same time, I think the conference helped make many things clearer than they were before. Clearer to me, I can say. I think it became really clear that the root causes of the global turbulence are not confined to the actions of single individuals or single nation states or even very controversial or disturbing events, no matter how important they are and how real they are in their impact, but that the root causes go to a deeper level. And so we didn't focus on dealing with the headlines that we're seeing in the newspapers or on the web every day. We were really trying to go to that deeper level, that substratum of cause and effect, to understand, because we concluded that unless we understand that and unless we get to those root causes, we're not going to be able to address that global turbulence. And without addressing it, we're not going to be able to address these challenges for which we think we have solutions. We think solutions have been formulated. Phoebe did a wonderful job of talking about it with regard to climate change. We know the things that can be done. In our finance meeting of well, it came out in a number of them. The question is, how do we create the conditions that will enable us to implement those solutions? That's what we have to address. It's not enough that we know on paper what will do it. I think it became clear that we're undergoing a period of radical transition, which may be termed a civilizational evolution or a civilizational transition. We haven't come here to predict what the outcome of that change is going to be. We haven't said that it's a fixed, determined result and we just have to ride it one way or another, whether it's uphill to something much better or it's downhill in the other direction. We have not been talking deterministically. But we have been saying that the change is not just a continuation of the past, any way more than the end of the World War II was the continuation of the past. You know, many of those who fought in the war and even won the war were imperial nations who were thinking now we can go back to our imperial colonial empires. And yet in 15 years, all the colonial empires in the world dissolved. Nobody saw it, nobody predicted it at that time. And even when they created the structure for the UN, it wasn't with the idea of dismantling all of the imperial empires at that time, but it happened in a period of 20, 30 years. Nobody predicted in 1989 what would be the world 3 years later. And I can say that because I worked in Eastern Europe, in Russia, in the area, on a commission for 5 years, meant 15 trips there, and never met anybody who predicted beforehand what was going to happen. In fact, in July of 1989, Gorbachev and Chancellor Kohl met in private and discussed the future of Germany. And we only know about this because one of our former trustees was in the room at that time. He was an advisor and aide to Gorbachev. And they both confided in private what they would never say in public, that eventually Germany, Eastern Germany and Western Germany must be reunited. It's inevitable. They agreed on it. But they also agreed that it would be at least 30 years and maybe 50 years. The two people who were closest to it, who knew most about what was going on at that time, could not see what was going to happen within 12 months. Could not foresee. They saw the eventual logic of it. They could not foresee it at the time. So that reminds us to be a little humble in our predictions about the future, whether they're positive or negative. Because history shows that there are turning points when even those who apparently should know the most or have the intention of what should happen don't really see what's coming. I think our discussions brought that out well. The discussions showed that the transition involves radical changes in the sources and distribution of power in global society. Economic power, military power, technology power. And if in fact that change doesn't take place, we're going to be in really hot soup. Because unless the power that we have, the power we have to solve all these problems, we have that power. Ketan's reports in Force for Good have demonstrated we have all the money we need. I think Phoebe said it today. We have all the money we need to implement the SDGs. We have the technological power to more than satisfy that. The real question is, how are we going to use that power? Who's going to control that power? And that's going to be a real determinant. It's what we do with it. It's not that we can't solve the problems. I think the conference really showed that the origins of the turbulence can be traced back to the very founding of the UN and of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We planted seeds, very provocative seeds, of higher aspiration, of higher values in the world at a time when they didn't exist. Whether it was for women's liberation or the rights of blacks or minorities or developing countries or anyone else, this was just the beginning of a dream of a world in which equality would have a say and would have a right. And we certainly haven't made that now. We're maybe more conscious of it now than we ever were before, because for now, and that came out in the last session today, because for now, we take it for granted that that's necessary, that that's essential. And without that, we cannot live effectively as a human race. That's never been the thinking in history up until now. But we still have a long way to go to make it happen. I mentioned a couple of sessions ago in the one on history what Ishmael Sarageldin mentioned in his opening remarks. The 2015 Agenda 2030 was really an unprecedented event in history, which Phoebe just mentioned again, when she said 190 of the 193 countries agreed on a set of universal values, plans, goals, and targets. When has the world, humanity, ever agreed to anything in that measure? And not anything, but I would say everything. At least they agreed and understood that this is what we need to do. And the very fact that we haven't achieved what was postulated, what was agreed on, what was committed to 10 years ago is only a measure of how radical was that event, with what foresight and progress that we could even get together and seriously think about it without thinking about all the reasons why we shouldn't do it or can't do it. And so it's not surprising that we're disappointed that we didn't achieve everything up until in the first 10 years, or even if we don't in the next 10 years. What we're doing now is in the midst of something unprecedented. And the question is, how did that happen? How did we get this far? How did we get from 1940 to 1945 and 1945 to 48 and then to 1989 and 2015? If we understand how we got this far, that may help us understand how do we get the rest of the way. Because we all know that this is not we can't stop now, that we need it more than ever. And the world and the climate is not going to wait around for us. I think it's also clear that the failures to fulfill the 17 SDGs reflects a world that is not yet fully prepared for the magnitude of the changes. It doesn't mean that we're going to give it up and run away from it, no matter what a president of some country says or a parliament says or anything like that. The news that came out yesterday from the International Court of Justice on recognizing the global responsibility of the world for climate and everything is an unprecedented step. We couldn't even get that for an advisory judgment up until now. But we've got to figure out how do we go the rest of the way and what's the process for that. The idea of human security, which we've been promoting for the last 4 years with the UN, is not just a mere slogan. I think it became even more clear to me as a result of our work on global turbulence, how fundamental is human security to our formula for the future. Because without that human security, we'll never address the underlying global turbulence. People are frightened, people are confused, people are insecure, and therefore they listen to the most extremist position or anybody who comes along and promises them a quick solution to our problems, when what they really need is we need to deliver them that sense of greater security in the world. And we need to make that message of 2015, the message and significance of those 17 SDGs, we need to translate it into a message for every human being on Earth. This Agenda 2030 is about your security. It's about your benefits. This is for you. This is for the people of the world. It's not for the nation states. It's not for the rich. It's not for the powerful. It's for every human being. And it's the first time we've had a program like that. So support it. And I think we've seen many other things confirmed by the discussion that we've had. At the same time, the conference raises many new questions and highlights areas where the answers we have are really not sufficient, and we have to go further to get it, to seek it, in order to get the kind of progress that we need. We need to clarify our understanding about the direction of the global social evolution is taking, and how do we guide that direction in the right way. And we've had discussions about it today. Not that we control it, but do we have a say in which way humanity is going to go? Does humanity have a say in that? What's the process by which that direction is determining it? And what can we do? We means not us, not a few people in a society or an academy, but what can we do as humanity to consciously guide that in the best direction for everybody? How can we avoid the typical paradoxes of human progress that every time we take 2 steps forward, we end up reacting and going backwards by a step? How have we overcome it in the past? How do we do it now? How can we reverse the retreat from the policies for peace, human rights, democracy, social equality that we've seen happening, and science-based evidence that we see being brushed aside and pushed to the side or even rejected now after working for it for so many decades? How do we do that? How do we stop that retreat? Why has it come up? Why has the opposition come up? And what is the solution for it? It's not the only time we've had to overcome serious obstacles in the past.
Garry, we would need to wind up in a minute, so we can move to the next minute.
Okay. How can we learn to avoid the unintended consequences, side effects, and the challenges posed by our advances in technology? And there are many other questions like this that we still need to answer. And the answers to all of these questions will be of paramount importance if we're going to be able to deal with the issues that we have before us. So certainly, WAAS at 65 is not the end of anything. It was an effort to clarify and help us to chart a clearer path for what we need to do in future. We as an academy, and we hope we partner with the dozen organizations who are collaborating with us on this event, and we hope a much wider network of organizations in the past. So we have to ask ourselves, how are we going to build on what has happened in the last 4 days? How are we going to translate what we've understood into practical actions, whether it's in the field of peace or the field of education or in catalytic strategies to accelerate work on the SDGs as Force for Good is doing and WCEREA and SDSN are doing. Our immediate priority, I think, for the Academy has to be to develop plans and a set of actions that will guide us for the next 3 to 5 years on how we move forward. And I hope, that all of you who have participated in this event and all the organizations that have partnered with us and many others that haven't will join with us and work with us, because this is a job for leadership in the world, and we need all the leaders and all the vision we can get for it. Thank you again for joining us and helping us on this, and I hope that you'll continue to work with us as we go forward.
Thank you, Garry, for that. And I quote David Weinberg from chat here for that eloquent and insightful summation. Thanks to all our panelists and everyone who has been with us over these 4 days. This brings us to the close of the WAAS at 65 conference. There are several great messages in chat, and I wish I had the time to read out all of them, but since I do not, I will read just this one, a part of this one from Jalal Azim, who says, we have chosen to lead the ongoing civilizational transition. This transition is happening, but the final outcome depends on our ideas, agency, and cooperation. Thank you, Jalal, and everyone who's been sharing their thoughts. We conclude the WAAS at 64 conference now as we proceed on our journey of leadership and thought that leads to action. Thank you all.